We have a couple of terrific speakers coming to the stage now that we'd like to introduce to you. We're excited to have them here with us as well. You should note that in your programs is a deeper introduction for these speakers, so you're welcome to take a look at that as well. Again, thank you to the Dr. LeMay and Ned Downing for the great program. I'd now like to introduce for our first session this morning, here to discuss India's societal landscapes, women's education, and workforce participation. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Anjuli Cameron, Chief Executive Officer of SEWA-AIFW, and Aashraya Seth, Humphrey International Fellow and founder of Impact 91. Please welcome them as they come to the stage.
All right, wonderful. Well, thank you for that introduction. As you mentioned, I'm Anjuli Cameron. I'm CEO of SEWA-AIFW. SEWA means to serve in the South Asian language, and we are a Minnesota-based nonprofit that serves the South Asian diaspora communities. So that includes India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, and of course, our most recent Afghan evacuees. Our community is the now second largest immigrant community in Minnesota and the fastest growing. So one of the things that Dr. LeMay mentioned is the importance of diaspora communities and the connection to India. And so, of course, much of what we see in the acculturation of communities in India, we see as they adapt and immigrate to the US. And so we see a lot of parallels between the work that SEWA does around gender-based violence, the economic empowerment of women, and what our guest, Aashraya Seth, is doing in India. And so I'll give Aashraya a moment to introduce himself and the wonderful work of Impact 91, and then we'll go into a little bit of a dialogue.
Thank you, Anjali. Thank you for the introduction. I am Aashraya. I come from India, born and brought up in Lucknow, then moved to Delhi, Bombay, everywhere. Currently a Fulbright scholar at the Humphrey School of Public Affairs, doing my public policy and gender. In fact, today is my graduation day, so once I wind up this, thank you very much. So yeah, I'll head off to the graduation. But yeah, I founded Impact 91 and Happy Periods is the two nonprofit organizations probably 8 years back. And we do extensive work in gender equity across education, environment, and public health, specifically in the areas of menstrual equity, reproductive rights, upskilling women and girls in STEM, climate justice. So yeah, we've been managing a diverse portfolio, and yeah, we've been supporting close to 500,000 people in the past 8 years. So happy to take up the questions.
Yeah, and Impact 91 does so many things with regard to increasing economic development for women in the workforce. I think there's many factors that prevent women in India from being able to participate in the workforce. And of course, we see that in diaspora communities in Minnesota. You know, one of the parallels we see is cultural norms within the community, and those people don't leave that when they immigrate to the United States. That's something that we see significantly in our work at SEWA. And so one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about is given, Dr. LeMay just mentioned the liberalization in the Indian economy that started in the 90s and, starting in 1991, we saw an opening up of the economy. But there have been significant groups that have been left behind, and a lot of those groups are the work that Impact 91 focuses on. So if you look at statistics, whether, it's international statistics or even the surveys done by the Indian government that started in 2018 around women's participation in the workforce, it still significantly lags behind other global countries. India is at 33% of women participation in the workforce. Bangladesh is at 37%. The global economy has women participating in the workforce at 50%. Can you talk a little bit more about the work that Impact 91 is doing around that? And then specifically, let's dive into the type of women that Impact 91 is serving, because there's not only India as a place of hierarchical structures, which has been alluded to in some of the questions that were just mentioned. And so there's caste, there's cultural norms, there's tribal groups, there's rural versus urban divides. There's a very restrictive wealth structure in terms of access to wealth and growth. So could you talk a little bit about the groups that Impact 91 works with?
Right, thank you very much. So we, as an organization, we work pan-India, across India. Specifically, we work in Uttar Pradesh, which is one of the largest states in India. We work Bihar, which is the adjacent state. We work mostly in the central northern part of India, again, Punjab, Haryana, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand. These are some of the states which has larger tribal population, larger marginalized and underserved communities. Our work extensively is on menstrual equity, on how do we increase access to free menstrual products to underserved and tribal girls in schools. And the connection to the menstrual equity element and women's economic empowerment and women's empowerment in general is there have been a lot of studies that we've seen in India specific and also globally. If I only talk about India, like close to 1 in 4 girls drop out of school every year when this at Minark. And this is the impact at the girls, the adolescents between 11 to 14 years of age. There are a lot of cultural stigmas, taboos that basically restricts them to get to the school, and that's where our intervention is. So Impact 91 and Happy Periods are the two organizations that work extensively on the ground, making sure that making sure that girls have access to free period products. They have comprehensive sexuality education, comprehensive menstrual education, and economic opportunities. So in terms of economic opportunities, we have several programs. One specifically I can talk about is STEMinism in India. So STEMinism, it's like bringing a revolution in the classrooms of STEM. So it's like science, tech, engineering, mathematics. We again engage with girls at the school level, specifically supporting the learning abilities, is specifically in the STEM subjects. So we set up STEM labs in different public schools, helping them to get to the STEM learning. And why STEM is important? Because we've seen in the past decade close to 45% women and girls graduate in STEM, but the workforce translation to that is mere 18%. So the program starts from 1/8. Yeah. So the program starts from the intervention at the school level and also supporting them at the higher education level. So the intervention is we help them with STEM learning engagement programs, and then we help them securing some scholarships to get to the higher education level and also providing the latest skills that are required in the market, probably like data analysis, learning programming languages, web designing, so that they can be market ready and have access to latest the jobs that are available in the STEM fields. This is broadly the work that we've been doing. There has been a US component to it. So Western Union Foundation funded one of the fellowships that I ended 2 years back in partnership with Watson Institute here in Colorado. So we did a collaborative program on entrepreneurial skills, on how do we build the capacity of young women and girls between 18 to 24 years of age in providing them entrepreneurial skills. And Watson was very prominent in this particular program. We were implementing partner in India, and we supported close to 2,500 girls in getting those entrepreneurial skills, having them access to startup funds from the government of India to launch their own startups. Taking a step back from the nonprofit and bringing in government of India's perspective, I think government of India has been very influential in terms of supporting women's economic empowerment in various capacities. They have, in the past 10 years, the government has invested extensively in terms of bringing banking to women. So close to 55%, approximately 500 million now have access to banking resources, insurance scheme that they can have leverage to. Approximately 200 million women have now access to direct loans that government of India gives, direct startup funds that government of India gives. So there are some really breakthroughs that we've seen in the past few years that the government of India has been implementing. And there are a lot of corporate partners, like Western Union has been very influential. Tata Trust has been doing extensive work with different governments. Gates Foundation, I've been a Gates scholar and have worked extensively with Gates. So they have been working with state governments, building the capacity of women and girls, and there has been heavy investment in some of these sectors.
Yeah, I think one of the points that you highlighted is leaning into economic development through entrepreneurship in India. And I think that's one thing that is a commonality across the South Asian community, both in India and in diaspora communities, is this entrepreneurial spirit, which is so critical to economic development. Because when we think about cultural norms within a community where Indian women are more likely to be abused by their partners than they are to be employed in India. That's the reality of the situation that we experience. That's certainly true in the United States as well. And much of SEWA's work is around gender-based violence for that reason when we talk about the empowerment of women and girls. So it's a significant factor, and the cultural norms are the basis in which we are operating. And so much of that work comes from having an ability to engage with women and their families in a way that adapts to those cultural norms. And so entrepreneurship plays a significant role in that. There's a growing entrepreneurship. It's not working in a factory position or going out on the farmland. Those farm jobs are being lost. Even though many of those were traditionally female-held jobs, they are lost to mechanization within tribal communities. And so finding entrepreneurship where women can make things at home, sell them in the marketplace. Those are all really important factors. I know Impact 91 has done some work around this area as well. So I would love if you could talk a little bit about that.
Right. So the program that I mentioned about STEMinism in India. So the idea is that if the cultural and traditional norms that you've been talking about, so I mean, growing up in a tier 1 city in Lucknow, but when we look at tier 2 and tier 3 cities, parents are still, they're conditioning young girls to that, it's still a concept that STEM is for maths and humanities are for girls. So it's still a construct which we've been trying to break through working in villages, working in different communities, in public schools across India. So this has been one of the major problems where any kind of STEM subject or STEM job, which we've seen, it's automatically seen as, okay, it's a man's role, not a woman's role. But predominantly, we've seen there's a lot of investment specifically in some of these sectors. Impact 91, we've been working with different public schools, different state governments. So our recent program was with the state of government of Uttar Pradesh. We worked with government of Punjab. Specifically during the COVID time, we worked with government of Punjab and made sure that all the girls and young people in general have access to free education technology during the COVID time, because there was a break from the schools and they did not have access to any kind of education. So we made sure we partnered with all the EdTech programs that were available and ensured that close to 200,000 young people in the state of Punjab and Haryana have access to education. In terms of the economic empowerment of women, I mentioned about one pipeline that we've developed through the STEM program. We're supporting them all through the career from the school to higher education to giving them market access of those opportunities. There's a very small element again that we do in terms of menstrual health work that we do is 3 programs as part of the menstrual health program that we do. One is installing vending machines in public schools. So there were vending machines, but they were super expensive. So there was a vending machine in India which costed approximately $100. Now, I worked on a machine 2 years back. We got that cost down from $100 to $25. So the idea is on how do we make these innovations more affordable and accessible to public. If we talk about sustainability in this particular sector, we've seen that close to 100,000 tons of plastic waste comes out of sanitary pad waste only in India. The idea of bringing menstrual cups to bring sustainability in the menstrual health sector again. So the menstrual cups is again one of the leading innovations to support the menstrual cycle. So a menstrual cup would possibly cost around $50 approximately in the US. There are various products which cost around $15 to $20 in India. We've developed something for $3, as low as $2 or $3 depending on the size. And the third important element here is cloth pads that again relate to the sustainability of the element. So we are trying now to work with tribal women and girls in the tribal part of UP, Bihar, and Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh to help them make their own cloth pads and develop a supply chain where they can sell their cloth pads. So it's a very small community of 1,000 tribal women and girls where we support them with basic required skills. So approximately 80% of them are working on making those cloth pads, and the other 20% of them are making, are ensuring on how they can have market access to basically sell those pads. So it's like a very small living that they make out of probably like $5 is what they make out of selling a pad, which is a small number, but I think it's a huge number for them when we look at. So yeah, these are some of the interventions that we've done.
Yeah, and I think there's also a component of this that, taking it a step further, one of the things that Impact 91 done is really focus on sexual health education and even what is menstruation, what is happening to your body. And I think to contextualize the impact of that in terms of women being able to enter into the workspace and even complete their education through high school, it is really this challenge of traditionally in Indian culture and in the Hindu religion, there's limited access for women and girls to continue with participating in schooling, in their education, cooking at home. You're not allowed to go to temple or worship during your menstruation. And so all of this cultural and societal pressure that women are somehow less than because they menstruate is embedded within Indian culture. It is embedded within religious structures. And so what happens is that many girls, especially in rural areas, there's a shift as more STEM fields are opening up in urban centers. But in rural areas, there's still a limitation of once a girl begins puberty and begins menstruation, that's the time for parents to pull her out of school. And so having access to education about what this means, that there's nothing wrong with your body, that you can still go worship at the temple and nothing will happen to you during that time is so critical. And so could you talk about some of the educational supports that Impact 91 has that is doing in rural schools and shifting not only the mindset of girls, but those surrounding them as well?
Right, that's a very important point. So education has been one of the key components of our work. I mean, we've installed vending machines. We are trying to support all of that work. But if we are not able to bring that behavioral change among girls and women, I think it's a lost cause. We might invest a lot. We bring in more investment. We can do a lot of innovations in that work. But if we are unable to shift the mindsets, if we are unable to educate them, I think we have lost that battle. So in terms of the comprehensive sexuality education, also the menstrual education, I worked on a curriculum 3 years back, and we work with state governments and public schools in India to ensure that there is a comprehensive menstrual curriculum in public schools. Why we need this? Because one of the statistics that we've seen, I think UNICEF did a study probably 4 years back where they highlighted around 82% of girls do not understand their body. So, and if we look at the Indian textbooks, there has been a gap in terms of understanding your menstrual health. So that's why menstrual health is very central. I mean, I have studied in one of the most premier boards in India. And we've seen, apart from learning just like a small menstrual cycle, paragraph, we've never heard anything beyond this. So it is so important. So we've introduced a menstrual curriculum where they learn about the bodily changes that are happening at puberty. They learn about puberty, how the bodies are changing, how you need to not follow the stereotypes and the myths that are available or that has been passed on through generations, like you cannot enter the temple, you cannot go to the office, things like that. And there are a lot of these stereotypes. So through the education, we try and break some of those. Then sustainability in the menstrual health sector. So what kind of new products that are available? So you might so the knowledge of sustainability is so important, not in just in terms of climate change, but also in terms of affordability and accessibility of a product. So you might invest $50 over 2 years to have access to pads every month, but you can only buy one menstrual cup that would be approximately $4, and you can use that for 8 years. So that's the affordability and accessibility component on this particular in this particular space. So yeah, education has been very key in our work, and we've been trying to work with as many governments as we can. May 28 is the Menstrual Hygiene Day, and I'll be here in Minnesota. And as part of the curriculum that that I designed and been working in public schools in India, we will be printing some of those curriculum handbooks and handing it over to public schools here in Minneapolis and Twin Cities and libraries, so that young people who menstruate in schools have access to those important information on menstrual health.
Yes, and I'm excited to share that SEWA will be partnering with Impact 91 in order to help share that curriculum. I think one thing that is very important to think about when we're talking about diaspora communities is that these norms do not shift over time. And so what we have seen here in Minnesota and across the country is that girls are not participating in health programs here in Minnesota because, of course, if menstruation is a taboo topic, and SEWA has developed some literature around that for girls here in the United States, but then even so, if you're talking about the broader scope of sexual health education in U.S. school systems, this is outrageous to many South Asian families in terms of social norms. And so what we often see is that girls will be pulled out of the health education system in school districts across the country because it is outside of that norm. And so it continues to perpetuate those kinds of myths. And so we see even here in the US that girls don't understand their own bodies and what their bodies are going through. One of the other key pieces is the pervasiveness of this perpetuation by both genders. So it is something that both women and men are perpetuating this across generations. One of the really important pieces in addressing all of these social norms is to really focus in on what is the perception of men and boys around their relationships to women. That's something that we really focus on. We have a South Asian men's circle that focuses on positivity and dismantling some of the patriarchal and hierarchical structures that don't allow for women to speak up in the home, are expected once you are married. Your in-laws expect you to leave your career, even if you pursue a career in STEM. So all of these things play into that. And so, certainly there's been global initiatives like He for She with the UN that really focus in on these areas. And then I know, Aashraya, you've also done some work in this area as well. So could you talk about that?
Yes, I think masculinities has been kind of a controversial topic, but the idea is on how do we engage more in men and boys in the conversation of gender equity. So there are two fronts of work that I do in this space. One is through my own nonprofit that I'll come to later, but one that I do with UN Women. So UN Women has a He for She initiative, basically bringing in more men and boys in the conversation of gender equity, and it's at the highest level to the mid-level. So when I say the highest level, UN Women brings in heads of state of different countries to ensure that the president or the prime minister is on board with the gender equity of the alliance that the UN Women is building. The governments are efficiently investing in their gender equity schemes. There is gender budgeting. There is so one of the most recent partner that came on board was Spanish president. The moment he became a champion of He for She at UN Women, he basically launched a feminist foreign policy for Spain. And I think approximately 21 countries or 22 countries have now their feminist foreign policies looking from the women, peace and security perspective. But that's just one element of it. The other element to that is when there's one engagement with the heads of state. The other engagement is with the corporate leaders. So somebody like Vodafone, the president of Vodafone, was one of the champions for He for She movement to ensure that there is gender parity within the workforce. They are ensuring that there is equal representation. There is no biasness within the hiring. There are more opportunities for women and girls in terms of hiring. So, and equal opportunities. And that has been the broader he for she narrative. And what I've been working on is how do we design new toolkits and giving like talking points to nonprofit organizations, corporates, and heads of state to ensure that there is gender parity within their system, whether it's corporate, whether it's government, or whether it's not for profit. In terms of the work that we do, there's a project that I designed probably like 5 years back called as Alvida Patriarchy. So Alvida is like an Urdu word of bye-bye and patriarchy is patriarchy. So it means bye-bye patriarchy. So we've got like smaller tools of engagement at the village development level where there are panchayat level where the volunteers engage with men and boys at that community level, at the small level, at micro level, and engages them in the conversation of how they can be equal partners at home in terms of domestic work. How can they support why and how they need to support the girls' education, why and how they need to talk about menstrual health, sexual health with the young people, their daughters, their sons in the family. So this has been one of the interventions that we did over these past 3-4 years, and we've seen that there has been remarkable progress in terms of the impact of how men and young fathers and boys have been engaging in these kind of communications.
Yes, and men tend to hold the positions of power in India, and so when we think about the Indian government and some of the policies that they've implemented, here in Minnesota, I would love to think that we are so advanced in terms of gender equity, parity, but we all know that that is not the case in the United States either. And even recently, some of your work has touched on the recent legislation that provided access to sanitary items within school districts across Minnesota. That was a recent piece of legislation that was only passed 2 years ago, to put it in context of where we are at as a state and as a nation in terms of gender parity. I think about some of the policies that have been developed by the government of India towards this aim of bringing women to the workforce. We could look at economic statistics about the growth in GDP purely from bringing more women into the workforce. It's more than double digits of India. And we talked about the glacial pace of growth. I don't think culture lags much behind in terms of the glacial pace at which culture moves within India in terms of shifting over time. And so where do you see the most success in Indian government programs in this area? And you have worked quite a bit with the government of India, particularly in I call it the Indian Midwest of it's the grain belt of India and Punjab and Haryana and Uttar Pradesh. So these are states where there's a lot of investment happening right now within the Indian government. What policies have been most successful in bringing women into the workforce, and where do you see the gaps in those policies?
I think there is some great deal of investment that the government of India has been putting in terms of through their policies, whether it's the Jan Dhan Yojana, where one of these prime ministers' scheme is ensuring that women have access to banking services, as I mentioned in the beginning, which is quite a big component, because if we look at that, there were a lot of schemes like the rural employment guarantee scheme in the past, where they were handing out cash to women who were working on field. Which constituted more than 50% of the workforce at the ground, but they were handing out cash, and there were middlemen who were basically not letting that money go to women. So programs like these have made really a big difference, where now women can have access to their bank accounts. They can just quickly swipe the card, have the money, whatever is being credited in their bank accounts. They have access to insurance schemes from the government at a mere probably 15 cent. You have access to free health services from the government. this is just the accessibility in terms of the policies, in terms of the service that the government is providing. But beyond that, there has been a large push in terms of entrepreneurial skills among young people in schools. So Niti Aayog, which is the government of India's premier think tank housed within the government, um, has a has an innovation wing called as the Atal Innovation Mission. So Atal Innovation Mission, the idea is they engage with schools across India, and this is a government scheme where they are. In the past 5 years, they've ensured that approximately 10,000 public schools have access to those STEM labs and entrepreneurial labs. And we could see innovation spurring out at the level of school. And those young people then get access to funding, become founders at a very young age of 17 or 18 through the Stand Up India program that the government of India is providing again. So you will have access to equity-free loans up to from 1 million to up to 10 million. And these are like fabulous schemes if you see, and the best part of this is of the loans that has been dispersed to date, which approximately are 300 million, 69% of them are women and girls. So it's the major chunk of the population who are specifically women and girls have been having access to some of these policies, and which is really helping them. So.
Yeah, wonderful. I'm not sure how we're doing on time. If we have 5, okay. So I think, I'd like to ask one question and then maybe give an opportunity to the audience to ask either about the work of SEWA or Impact 91. One key piece, and this is kind of alluded to in some of the previous presentations and dialogue, is this growth in technology, whether it's in a lot of much of India is becoming the tech capital. That's how it's perceived globally. We know that happens in certain regions and cities in India, urban metropolitan areas where there's a high level of tech growth, in Mumbai and Bangalore. And we're seeing not everyone is included in that tech economy, and there are many who are left behind. But there's also opportunity. Digital literacy in India is growing. There's more access. There's a bypass where communities that have gone without electricity suddenly have cell phones and skipped all of the technology and economic growth in between then. And so you're seeing more global access to technology. What role has that played in access to education for young girls and opportunities that have opened up?
I think that's a very important point in terms of having access to tech for women and girls, because one of the studies that Yale Economic Growth Center came out with, Professor Rohini Pandey did a few years back, and which highlighted that more men have access to mobile phones than women. And around the same time, of course, we've seen the banking piece that I was telling about is so important. And when you match, majority of the women were disconnected from the technology. So they were not any way connected to technology because they don't have access to mobile phones, they don't have access to computers, laptops, or basic technology even. And some of these schemes by the government of India, there have been a lot of efforts by the corporate social responsibility, by Tata, specifically Tata Trust has been doing some great job in this particular space, and non-profit organizations. So to basically intervene at these levels and making sure that girls have access and women have access to mobile phones, women have access to STEM learning, computers, so that they can upskill them and connect them to the technology, what's happening globally, have access to these services from the government of India or otherwise, which non-profits provide direct to home. So yeah, I think it has been very revolutionary.
Wonderful. And I think we can, okay. I think we can open it up to one question with the time remaining. I see a question here.
You talked about you working in the schools to educate students about menstrual health and sexuality. And then you alluded to in the United States, there's pushback about that. I'm wondering if you could talk just a little bit more about, are you receiving pushback in India? Do parents have as much rights in the educational system to pull their kids out or say what the curriculum should be? And how is it the same or different than it is here to try to do that education?
Thank you. That's an important point. Glad you picked that up. I mean, I won't say that parents have a lot of say in terms of the education that the school is providing. There are separate committees set up by Government of India and who basically work on the education policy level to draft some of those curriculums, ensure that what is being taught in schools. Because of a lot of cultural norms, there is of course resistance from parents to get to to learn about sexual education, because it's not right to talk about some of those things. But I think through efforts directly engaging with public schools, directly engaging with schools, I think that intervention has been quite successful. When you work directly with the city administrations or schools directly, it has adopted really well. I can give an example from Minnesota during my time here. So Governor Walz passed the bill for menstrual to ensure that menstrual products will be in all public schools and education institutions 2 years back. And as an offshoot, there was a Minnesota Menstrual Equity Coalition that was set up, and I'm the member of that coalition. So the idea is that all the schools will have access to funds to ensure that they can buy tampons for people who menstruate in schools. There is not enough monitoring and tracking that was being done. So and even the education component was missing. So a few of us are working towards setting up a toolkit for all the schools across Minnesota that will give access to menstrual education, basic idea of how the law looks like, what do you expect out of the government, what kind of products do you expect at the school level. And this will be available in the next 3 to 4 months. The other aspect to this as the last point is on the monitoring and evaluation. So we are also looking at a direct survey, which has responded by approximately 2,000 school administrators, 200 school administrators, giving us back information on they received the money or not. If they received the money, where it has gone, were they able to access products? If the students were able to access products, what kind of resistance has been there? So we've seen cases of vandalism, etc. But I think it's important. There's a resistance in both the countries. I can give you an example. The final number is, as I mentioned, 1 in 4 girls drop out of school every year at Menarche. It's same in the US. Exactly same. 1 in 4 girls don't have access to clean period products in the US at that level.
And I can just leave with one final note, and that is that many of those girls are from immigrant and refugee communities, from ethnic and cultural communities that don't have access to those products. So very important point to highlight. Thank you.
I think I get to hear lots of conversations in my work, as you can imagine, and this is one of the most engaging and insightful conversations the two of you just had. It's like the two of you have done this a few times. Have you ever done this before together? You just were so particular.
We did cheat a little and did it the other day.
Well, it was very insightful and very engaging, and we're very thankful to the two of you for giving your time today to share with us. Let's give them a round of applause.
Thank you very much.